I think there's a set of characteristics, psychological characteristics that you can see, which are the mark of elite performers, and they seem to be relatively common across different sports. It's my personal contention that the difference in skill, or the difference in physical fitness, and maybe even the difference in determination between the top 200 athletes in any one sport in the world is not very big. But it's the psychological characteristics of being able to cope with that pressure in training, but most importantly in competition, that determines who gets there and who's an also-ran.
In the modern sporting world, more and more athletes are turning to science to help them build the mental attitude it takes to win. Unless, of course, they feel they already have it.
To be honest with you, psychologists and everything else like that, unless they have been out there in the race, been under the pressure that I've been under, they can't tell me, to be honest with you.
You have a number of high-level athletes who say, I'm very tough-minded, I don't need a sports psychologist. Well, that's probably fair. That's why they're top athletes. They didn't need a sports psychologist. They probably passed on the way up people who maybe dropped out the sport, people who potentially were much better, but were deselected because they didn't have the right, if you like, psychological set of characteristics to match the physical characteristics and skill characteristics that they needed to get to top line.
Running into the Games, there was a predicted medal hope for the Olympics in 1500. I was coming of age. I was living under the shadow of Korovet, Cram and Elliot, and I was to be the next one.
Matthew Yates is one of the finest 1500-metre runners of his generation. The last time he came to this stadium, it seemed a formality that he would collect an Olympic medal, but his mind let him down. Returning now and looking back at what happened, the telltale signs of impending disaster are clear for him to see.
I was very scared to fail here, which is one of the problems. On such a world stage as this, you knew at home people were watching. There was people here watching. People were going to be reading about it the next day as well in the press. And you didn't want to fail.
Feeling mentally low after an illness, fear undermined Yates's confidence, even before he'd arrived to compete.
I left England to come and train out in Spain. And physically things were going awfully well, and my training was working fine. And I was doing some awesome times on the track. But to me, that wasn't equating with the way I felt, and the way I felt was very low, and I doubted what I could do, and I just basically had zero confidence. You know, I almost felt the point where I thought my coach was telling me the wrong times to make me feel better. But they were genuine, the times were genuine, and I look back on it now and think, God, you know, that was just incredible shape I was running. The tabloids had a field day. I never actually locked myself in the loo. It was a typical piece of journalistic exaggeration. It was a day from hell. I remember walking into the darkness and the musky cold of the concrete and the smell of the track underneath the stadium. Now that scene, warming up, jogging around, and the groups of Kenyans running around together, warming up as well. Not seem to have a care in the world out there. You know, like this was just another meeting for them, whether it was in a village or, you know, in Barcelona, it was nothing to them. Well, the first call went out, and it goes out in 3 different languages. That was my call, to go out and run. And as soon as that announcement was finished, I said, I'm not running. Easy, I ain't running. That's a decision, I'm not going to run. Told the national coach that I wasn't running the meeting, and he promptly told me I was. Ran over to the toilet. Obviously, toilets have been used a lot at the Olympics for the fact that there are a lot of nervous people. It's just as coming up. I only got 50 metres from the toilet, and Norman was there panicking. I said, "I'm coming, there ain't no problem. I'm running there. You know, you told me I'm running. I've got to run, haven't I? Simple as that." It was almost as if you were walking to an execution of your own. It was so slow. And they were shouting two names. There was mine being shouted and Cacho's. And the hairs went up on your back, and you could have almost started to cry at that point because the emotions were up so high. And I didn't want to acknowledge any of the shouts or the cheers for me. I wanted to just ignore them, but I heard them all. That wasn't a good sign, because when you're fully concentrating on what's ahead, you don't hear anyone. There's 200,000 people in here and you wouldn't hear them. You're concentrating on yourself and your race that's coming up. You don't hear them.
Come on, Matthew! You can do it, Yatesy!
Go for it, Matthew!
Matthew Yates left the Olympics empty-handed. Despite his undeniable ability, his mind sabotaged his performance. Though he's now back on form and winning, with expert scientific help at the time, his memories of Barcelona might be very different.
There are a number of pressures in.
Barkley has battled for the last 3 years with pain and injuries that have often stopped him and coach John Trower from training. Even the fear of hurting can be enough to make practice impossible.
Well, if you're thinking about your shoulder hurting when you let go, you may be perfectly all right until 3 strides out and the brain says, "Hey, pal, you're going to let go in a minute, you're going to hurt," and therefore your brain is saying, "Don't do it, don't throw."
For Barkley, even the smallest of injuries is a nightmare.
You're inhibited to train, basically. You know, you're totally inhibited. And it's very important as a javelin thrower to stand on the end of a runway and be totally uninhibited and just look down the runway and thinking of one thing, and that is just blasting the spear out the end of the stadium.
But Steve Barkley has discovered that the key to training when he is too injured is working out in his mind.
Even though, obviously, you can't get out there and throw if you're hurt sometimes, you can do maybe, 1,000 throws in the armchair at home, and, you're never going to get hurt.
Imagine yourself on a beach. You're feeling very relaxed.
The first step is to actually block out everything that's going on around you and progressively relax each part of the body. And then you'd move on in the mind's eye and start doing some stretching, and actually listen out, see who's about, look around wherever you are. And you can, a nice thing about it, you can jump from the gym and all of a sudden you can put yourself in the Olympic arena with 80,000 people there. So then, you pick the javelin up and feel the javelin and see, check everything on it, and you can come in and throw again and again and again, and you try the first round, the last round, the middle rounds. You're winning, you're losing, the rain's coming down, the sun's shining. Every possible factor that you might have to come against, whether it be a problem or not a problem, you do it over and over again until you're comfortable with it and there's no real problem.
Barkley's mental workouts have helped him through long periods of injury in the past. But last year, he used them to pull off something not far short of a miracle. Unable to train for the major athletics tournament, the World Championships, he decided he'd compete anyway and spent months preparing almost entirely in his mind.
Last year, I actually took the effort to use it to replace, the throwing that I was missing. I might have had 1,000 throws in my brain and about 10 throws with my arm, so it wasn't the ideal situation, but got away with fourth place.
Psychology kept Steve Barkley in contention last year despite his injuries. Now, fully fit, he is aiming for Commonwealth gold in Canada.
Jogos Psicológicos.